Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, describes the qualifications of devotion and performing devotional service. This chapter speaks about Jnana and Vairagya. Again, as Rupa Goswami spoke about these things in the beginning, he's speaking about them again and their relationship with devotional service. Prabhupada begins the chapter by saying some scholars recommend that knowledge, that means knowledge that one is a spirit, aham brahmasmi, and renunciation are important factors for elevating oneself to devotional service, that they're required, that one needs knowledge. And actually the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita speak about devotional service as a step on the top step on the yoga ladder. To step, if you use the analogy of the ladder, the yoga ladder, it would seem that first you have to take all the steps to get to the top step. But actually, Prabhupada explains, that is not a fact. One can take to bhakti without anything else. Actually, the cultivation of knowledge or renunciation, which are favorable for achieving a footing in Krishna consciousness, may be accepted in the beginning, but ultimately they may also come to be rejected, for devotional service is dependent on nothing more other than the sentiment or desire for such service. It requires nothing more than sincerity. So there is no prerequisite for devotional service other than devotional service itself. Bhakti only comes from bhakti. Jnana, Vairagya, they cannot bring bhakti. Bhakti is independent, swatantra, it is dependent, and it has nothing to do with Jnana and Vairagya. Only indirectly and incidentally. Bhakti in and of itself is descending from the spiritual world. It is Krishna's internal energy. It is Krishna's internal energy. It has nothing to do with Jnana, which is born of the mode of goodness, and Vairagya, which is the detachment from those things of the material world. Detachment from those things of the material world means it is connected, it is an aversion to the material world. So it has something to do with the material world, but bhakti has nothing to do with the material world. So in the beginning, so much of our preaching is as if Vairagya was very important. When we preach to someone, we tell them such good news like you're going to die, and your body's going to get sick, and your wife's going to die, and your children are going to die, and your mother's going to die, and your father's going to die. And whatever you have collected in this world, it is temporary, and you're going to have to leave it behind. This is not actually the preaching of bhakti. Actually, it's the preaching of tyag, renunciation. And we emphasize that often in the beginning. You're not this body. This body, it is just stool and mucus and bones. They like that preaching in Russia? Yeah, it's nice. But this actually has nothing to do with bhakti. Bhakti is devotional service to Krishna. We preach using the techniques of the jnanis. This type of preaching is necessary in the beginning. It is like cutting down the forest, the weeds in the forest, because as long as one is attached to material things, especially the body and the things of the body, material Krishna padataksvatova mito vipadeta grihavatana madanta gobhiya vichatata mizram punas puna chavati chavananam. As long as one is attached to those things of the material world and has taken griha vrata, I am going to enjoy my life with my family members. As long as one is holding something tightly in his hand, and he's so attached to holding it tightly, what else can he pick up with that hand? He cannot pick up anything else with that hand. So we have to preach in such a way that he's inclined to put those things down, so his hand is free to pick up something else. So we have to preach, this is mighty, horrible, this and that, so that people become a little detached so they can take up the positive Krishna consciousness. But otherwise, actually, bhakti has nothing to do with these things. If one takes up bhakti, those things automatically occur. One automatically gets knowledge. Jnanam, Haituki, Vasudev Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Priyodita, Jnanayad Yasu Vairagyam Jnanam Shayar Haituka. It happens automatically. It is a byproduct of bhakti. Bhakti is not dependent upon it. But just to clear the field, just like if you have a forest that you wanted to plant some nice crops in, first you have to clear that forest before you can plant the crops. But the clearing doesn't have anything actually, in fact, to do with the planting of the crops. It is just preparation. It is not what you are actually trying to do. So similarly, in this way, bhakti has nothing to do with anything else. It is coming from the spiritual world, has nothing to do with the material world. It is dependent upon nothing other than one's desire to serve Krishna. That sentiment, that sincerity is what bhakti is made out of. So it is opposite to the opinion of some learned scholars, is the opinion of expert devotees, that mental speculation, meaning jnana, and the artificial austerities of yoga practice may be favorable for becoming liberated from material contamination. In other words, what is liberated? This is that negative concept again, removing the dirt from the heart, getting out of prison, getting free from the negative material things. But bhakti is something positive. So getting free doesn't have anything to do with you'll do when you're free. So these things may be helpful for liberation, but they are not helpful for Krishna consciousness. And practically speaking, if someone hears in his first years in Krishna consciousness, so much years of Krishna consciousness, and he hears about how you have to become detached from everything, you have to be detached from your family, you have to be detached from this, and you have to be detached from your body, and you have to be detached from this and detached from that. It is actually not favorable for devotional service, because to be like that, your heart has to become hard and callous. So, as Prabhupada explains here, these things will also make one's heart harder and harder and harder and harder. So it is a very, very fine line. On one hand, we know that the material world and the relationships in the material world are illusory, and we don't want to get very much entangled in them. But if we become completely callous, like the Mayavadis say that the material world is illusion. So if someone gets hit by a car and he's lying in the road bleeding, we'll think, oh, this is illusion. The suffering is illusion, my seeing it is illusion, the pain he is feeling, the blood is coming from illusion, therefore you can just walk by it and not care. But that is not actually the mood of a devotee at all. He doesn't say it's illusion in the sense that it's mithya, it doesn't exist. No, he says it's an illusion in the sense that it's temporary, and therefore we don't take it completely seriously. We take it in one sense with a grain of salt. That's an English idiom. You take it with a grain of salt. It is there, a grain of salt, but it doesn't have all value. It is only a grain of salt. So we see that the sufferings of the material world are real. They're there. But it is not that we base our life on getting free from suffering and obtaining enjoyment. No, we accept that they are real. Not like the Mayavadis who say they are illusion. And if you try to make your heart very callous to everything, others' suffering, it's very bad for devotion. You will become hard-hearted. So Prabhupada was seeing the people, the starving people of Bengal, scouring through the garbage, and he began to cry, looking for some food, and he began to cry. We have to feed them, he said, but prasadam. So the Vaishnavas are paraduka dukhi. He actually feels for the suffering of others. The true Vaishnava feels more than we can imagine. He feels so much pain, but he doesn't get sentimental. And the man is dreaming, and he's dreaming that he has that a tiger is eating him. So he doesn't enter the dream and take out a gun and shoot the tiger. Don't worry, I'm coming in your dream. I'll get rid of the tiger. Don't worry. No, he wakes the person up and gives him his real life, awakens him to his real life. So a devotee does not. There's a fine line in this between sentimentality and callousness. So with knowledge, he steers that on that, and he stays on that fine line. Is this point clear? It's like Raghunath Bhatta Goswami. His parents were who? Excuse me. Yes. Yes. Tapan Mishra. So he visited Mahaprabhu, and what did Mahaprabhu tell him when he visited him in Jagannath Puri?
He should take care about his parents because they are devotees.
Yes. Okay. So Raghunath Bhatta could have said, but anyway, everyone is ultimately a devotee in their spirit souls, and I don't have anything to do with them ultimately. I've had so many parents. But that is the wrong sentiment for a Vaishnava. We naturally feel affection for our parents. Naturally, it's natural. If we don't feel affection for our parents, it's unnatural. But because we feel affection for our parents, we should fall in Maya and ruin our lives and their lives too? No. We feel affection for the parents. We bring that to the affection of doing the best things for them, of becoming Krishna consciousness and very intelligently helping them become Krishna consciousness. Or if they're averse to Krishna consciousness, we know that by becoming devotees, we are still helping them. The hardness of the heart, because Krishna consciousness is soft. It means softness of the heart. It doesn't, yes, it means softness of the heart. That's how Bhava Bhakti is described in that way. It is the softness of the heart, mazrin. But still, some callousness is needed. In the beginning especially, otherwise we become too sentimental and we can't break away from our friends and our business and our family, etc. So in the beginning, to get a foothold in Krishna consciousness is necessary. And a lot of our preaching is on this level. This is nonsense, this is Maya, this is nonsense, this is nonsense, this is nonsense. But Krishna consciousness is a lot more than everything is nonsense. And everything is offensive and everything is... No, Krishna consciousness is all positive actually. So, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause and effect of all that be. And to approach Him, the Absolute, the process of devotional service, which is also absolute, has to be adopted. That means that this process is descending. It has nothing to do with the material world. Even the seed, we've defined the seed of devotional service as Shraddha, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur has defined it. And also it can be defined as the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness also. But this is also devotional service. It's also descending. So So this is all absolute, and therefore it shouldn't be tampered with. One old devotee got in so much trouble in his Krishna consciousness, Kirtananda, because thinking that the means of devotional service was just Indian. It was Indian or Hindu in some way. Could you tell him that he can't bang out there? He can move over and do it maybe. So he tried to change everything. This wasn't the root of the problem. But you can't change the process of devotional service. It is absolute, as Krishna is absolute. It is descending. It is Krishna's internal energy. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita by the Lord Himself. One can understand me only through devotional service. In beginning His teachings of the Gita, the Lord said to Arjuna, because you are my devotee, I shall teach these secrets to you. Vedic knowledge means ultimately to understand the Supreme Lord, and the process of entering into His kingdom is devotional service. That is accepted by all authentic scriptures. Mental speculative neglect process of devotional service, and by simply trying to defeat others in philosophical research, they fail to develop the ecstasy of devotion. So it means devotional service means that Krishna is giving everything. It is His mercy, the mercy of His internal energy. It is very, very deep. Understanding this very deep. Page 14. Krishna instructs Uddhav, my dear friend, the prophets these devotees have everything at their disposal, but they desire nothing outside of my devotional service. If ever a devotee should desire some material profit, like promotion to the heavenly planets, or some spiritual profit to go to Vaikuntha, by my causeless mercy his desires are easily fulfilled. So what do you want? You can have it all from devotional service. But the best thing is to just want to serve Krishna, and Krishna, the servant of servants. Because we think, the devotee thinks, I have no ability to give Krishna pleasure by my service. So therefore, because I am not qualified. But if I can serve those who have the ability to give Krishna pleasure, or the servants of the servants of the servants, just let me be engaged somehow or another in Krishna's service. Then I will be serving Krishna. And then Krishna, when the devotee has that mood, Gopi Bharta Padakamalayo Dasa Dasana Das, when he has that mood, Krishna actually, after some time, will engage him directly. But we should see that what quality can I possibly develop to give Krishna pleasure? He has Sudam, Sridam, Subal, Soka Krishna, Raktak. He has so many friends and so many gopi friends. What can I do? even on the spiritual platform, he's already happy. These devotees, these exalted personalities have already completely satisfied Krishna. What can I add? Let me just become their servant. It takes a lot to actually understand this and accept it. Just like sometimes when we want to fire up the devotees in book distribution, we say, who's going to become the number one book distributor? Who's going to become, and everyone strives to become number one book distributor. Like that. And it's nice because the devotees need to become enthusiastic and encouraged in that way. But if we want to become the number one servant and we need that type of encouragement, what will we do? We will push Srimati Radharani out of the way and try to defeat her? Or Lalita and Vishaka? If we need that kind of encouragement, there is only a limit to how far we can progress. So at some point it will hit us, and it's very, very heavy what does it mean to become an insignificant servant? And it's heavy. But this is Krishna consciousness. Now, this is actual knowledge, and this mood of humbly engaging in the service of Guru, Vaishnavas, Guru Parampara, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all the way back like that. This is actually really knowledge. And knowledge about who we are serving, this is really knowledge, having nothing to do with the knowledge that Krishna consciousness is not dependent upon. This knowledge is Krishna consciousness. Knowledge about Krishna is Krishna consciousness. It is Krishna's internal energy. It is Bhagavatam. It is the writings of the Goswamis. And similarly, what is detachment in this world? So we've, in the beginning of Bhakti Rasamrita Nectar Devotion, and here also, Rupa Goswami is describing how devotional service is not dependent on detachment and knowledge. But here, now we should understand what type of knowledge and what type of detachment is real, and it's the internal energy. So now Prabhupada, or Rupa Goswami and Prabhupada, are explaining on page 114 what is real renunciation. One should not be attached to material sense enjoyment, but should accept everything enjoyable which is in relationship to Krishna. For example, eating is necessary, and one wants some palatable dishes to satisfy his sense of taste. So in that case, for the satisfaction of Krishna, rather than for the satisfaction of the tongue, some palatable dishes may be prepared and offered to Krishna. Then it is renunciation. That is renunciation. Let the palatable dishes be prepared, but unless they are offered to Krishna, one should not accept them for eating. This vow of rejecting anything which is not offered to Krishna is actually renunciation, and by such renunciation one is able to satisfy the demands of the senses. So, Prabhupada is turning around the typical Vairagi definition of renunciation and putting it exactly into its correct perspective. Once, I never heard Prabhupada directly said this, but it was famous that I may have mentioned this before, that there's a picture of Ramakrishna when someone is offering money. And there's lots of people in India like this. These sadhus, if you give them money, they won't touch it in their hand because money is too contaminated. So they'll only accept it like this, with their cloth. Has anyone ever seen this? Yes? You ever seen it in the South they do this? They won't touch it, it's too contaminated, but they'll go like this. And put it in there. And so Ramakrishna had, there was a picture of him, someone's money, and he's pushing it away like this. Did I mention this at some point? And then Prabhupada said that you should take my picture. Someone is giving me money and I'm going like this. More, not enough, I want more, I want more. So what does renunciation mean? Renunciation, how could we renounce something that's not ours? So if Vladik comes into my room and says, Birijan Prabhu, to tell you how renounced I am leaving your room and I'm not taking your computer with me. This is how renounced I am. It's like, thank you very much. That's not renounced. It's not even yours. How can you renounce something that's not yours? Because Amit isn't here. I can't teach him. And since you're taking over some of his service, it's part of your service. How ridiculous! Renouncing something that's not yours. I'm renounced from your watch and your kavacha and your pen and the money that you have and this and that and this and that. I'm renounced from all of these things. How ridiculous. We all smile because we know that it's easy to renounce something that's not yours. That's not renunciation at all. The problem is with the things that you think are yours, to renounce them. But in this world, nothing is ours and everything belongs to Krishna. Bina prakritamasthadam kamano buddha evada bhumirapono vayu kamano buddha evada. Everything, from the air to the microphone, and Prabhupada to give the the example of the microphone all the time, here too. That we should use these things in Krishna's service because everything is Krishna's. The intelligence that it took someone to make a Sony professional mic tape recorder, the intelligence for the watch, the intelligence for the plane, everything comes from Krishna. The ingredients, everything is Krishna's. So therefore, real renunciation, yukta vairagya, nirbandha Krishna sambandha, yukta vairagya uchate, means to use everything in Krishna's service because He owns everything, and use it with detachment. So therefore, Prabhupada said, utility is the principle. That means that everything should be used in Krishna's service because it is Krishna's. That is renunciation. And that principle is the gift of Srila Rupa Goswami. Now who knows that verse? Shaktasya vishayan yatartan upayunjata nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yukta vairagya uchate. That verse should be memorized by everyone. This is our utility is the principle. Should I ask it on the test tomorrow? Why? If I tell you I'm going to ask it, what's the quote? It's in Chaitanya Charitamrita somewhere. It's in the verse book, I'm sure. It's in Bhagavad Gita. Nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yukta vairagya uchate. But you should memorize this verse. Did I say I was going to ask it on the test? I didn't say that. But you should know this verse. It will be very helpful to you in your life if you know this verse and the deep meaning behind it. Am I going to ask it on the test? You say no? You say yes. You don't know. I also don't know. I'll find out. Now, keep in mind though, what's very, very important to understand is that utility is the principle, but it has to be with detachment. So therefore, not only is utility is the principle, but purity is the force. If you try to make utility the principle without purity being the force, in other words, if people in the name of using everything in Krishna's service start to use things in their own service of their sense gratification, then everything is ruined. So utility is the principle, purity is the force, and preaching is the essence. Without preaching being the essence, there is no need for utility being the principle. And because we tend to be attached to all these things, this material things, because we have the preaching movement, Prabhupada's movement is so huge and so powerful that we can use everything in the service of the movement. But there must be purity. And it must be based on what? Books. Because the purity doesn't come from our speculation and our good ideas. Book distribution and book studying. Both. Not only distribution and not only studying. Both. I heard Prabhupada say 2 times, my only criticism of the devotees is that they think the books are for distribution and not for reading. Distribution of knowledge. We should be eager to take this knowledge and to distribute it and become generous and have Krishna consciousness expand in our heart for the distribution of books and transcendental knowledge. So anashaktasya vishayan. Anashaktasya. What does ashakti mean? In one of the stages. That's another verse that really should be memorized, although we didn't talk about it. Attachment. So anashaktasya means without attachment. So to use things in Krishna's service without personal attachment, that is real renunciation. And what is the opposite? Who knows the name, the Sanskrit term for the opposite of real renunciation, of this yukta vairagya? Oh yeah, I was looking at you, I wanted to call on you. Yeah. Falgu vairagya. What does that mean?
Comes from the river known as Falgu.
Yes.
Which is actually the river going underground. It's actually existing. It is held by
Sand. False. Falgu means false renunciation. Because there is a river. Sometimes this happens. Often even. A river, there's a riverbed, and the river runs underneath. On top there's sand. So if people renounce falsely, just I give up everything. On the surface there is sand, but the river of material desire is running beneath. You can be sure of that. It is a great term and a great understanding. So this is what happens to the so-called renunciates, because they don't have the higher taste of Krishna consciousness, of bhakti. So the river of desire for material enjoyment will be running underneath. It is impossible to stop this river, practically speaking, because desiring is the very nature of the living entity. If we cannot desire Krishna, we have to suppress desire. And it doesn't work. The river we may cover it, but the river will run underneath. So it behooves us to get the higher taste in Krishna consciousness. It's important. But we can't be so greedy that we don't follow the process. That is foolish. We follow the process, patience, conviction, determination, etc. We follow and we will attain. So Prabhupada spends so much of this explaining these points about you can accept everything. Typewriters, dictaphones, etc. Everything can be used in Krishna service.
So if you have to follow the process, so to what extent, how are we going to know that to what extent we should apply this carelessness in the beginning?
Well, you need, in different times and in different parts of the movement, sometimes it was applied in different ways. Sometimes the devotees would be they would cut themselves off from their parents and things like that. And other times devotees didn't do that. So it has to be under superior guidance. The beginner doesn't know how much he should do it. So there has to be some higher experienced shastric intelligence behind him. Give him some hints of how to deal in the proper circumstance, how to deal properly. And then there are on page 116, there's a point that Prabhupada's making that's important. The spiritual master must never be carried away. And that's actually being continued from 115. By an accumulation of wealth or a large number of followers. In other words, if you have you have a lot of money, or not only a spiritual master, anyone who has a lot of money, and they think that they'll just hire people, they'll get a set of deities and hire a priest, and therefore they'll be doing devotional service by having the priest worship the deities by their money. And then you get someone you buy the vegetables, you have your servant go buy the vegetables, you have your cook the vegetables, you have your priest offer it, and your only seva is prasadam seva at the end. But all those other things, they're not actually devotional service. You don't get the credit for devotional service. When you just use your money to do devotional service, that is not actual performance of the angas of devotional service. But for a spiritual master, he can't, his business is preaching. So he may start some temples, and he may have his disciples perform so many of the angas of sadhana bhakti. So this injunction here is so that to the spiritual masters, that they be careful and make sure that they continue. If they are not doing the temple type of sadhana bhakti, they have to do the others of hearing and chanting and smaranam Krishna, shravanam kirtanam Krishna smaranam. Is that clear? Not to do everything. Don't have your followers hear for you and chant for you and read the books for you and distribute the books for you and write the books for you and worship the deities for you, and then again you should have them eat for you too. The prasadam for you. No. No, this is a warning to the spiritual masters and following the line of Srila Rupa Goswami, that if they cannot do all the, if due to their responsibilities as spiritual master, they cannot do all the angas of bhakti, they should make sure they perform the main angas of hearing and chanting, etc., and therefore carry on. Other points, that there is no need for any other purificatory processes other than bhakti. Everything will naturally happen if one performs Uttama Bhakti. And all good qualities will naturally come. It is not that performing devotional service brings good qualities in someone, but those good qualities, like the association of the devotees so much, they come and take shelter of the devotees. That's how one of the acharyas have explained. But we see naturally they are there, and when the impurities of good qualities are there, naturally when impurities are removed, the good qualities manifest. And then Prabhupada explains that Krishna consciousness is so powerful that even if you perform one of the angas of devotional service fully, you'll get the full result. Or the 9, or 8, or 7, or 6. This is how powerful the different angas of devotional service are. And then finally, the last 3 lines, Sri Rupa Goswami says that the regulative principles of devotional service are sometimes described by authorities as the path of serving the Lord in opulence and veneration. And that is called Marjada Marg. Maryada. This term comes up sometimes in India. Maryada or Marjada Marg. The path of opulence. This is serving the Lord in the path of opulence. And the Ballavacharjas use this. The followers of Ballavacharya. They also call them Pusti Marg, which comes later. Maryada. The last 3 lines of page 118. Write the last 3 lines in this chapter. Maryada Marg, the path of opulence and veneration. Okay, any questions? I tried to go a little quicker, so we have a little time if there are any questions to do with anything about the test. As long as they're not, are you going to ask this and are you going to ask that? Yeah.
Remember you said that Bhagavatam is real knowledge. But so is Bhagavad Gita Gyan or also what?
Bhakti. But Bhagavatam is graduate. And the Bhagavad Gita contains, what it does, it ties together all the philosophical systems and show how they, and all the systems of advancement of jnana, yoga, karma, and show how they ultimately lead to bhakti. And also the middle 6 chapters, they speak directly about Krishna. And the last 6 chapters, or 5 chapters, speak about jnana. All the knowledge that's necessary to bring us to the lotus feet of Krishna. So things that are used in Krishna's service, they're spoken by Krishna, of course. And actually bhakti is in every, Prabhupada shows how bhakti is in practically every verse, every philosophical point. Krishna is actually bringing it to the point of bhakti. Prabhupada shows that in his purport. So it's bhakti.
So again we see that devotees come to the person and take vows and so by taking these vows and etc., it will force ourselves in the realm of bhakti.
No. You certainly can't force yourself into the realm of bhakti. But when devotees perform those vows, it is not to force themselves into the realm of bhakti, it's to attract the attention of Krishna. Just like it's explained that there is one Chandrakanti who danced all night in front of the deities to attract the attention. That will be explained later on a higher level. Are you familiar with that reference? So she attracted Krishna's attention. So there's a subtlety in the mood, difference in the mood, so we shouldn't have that first mood that you're suggesting. You can't force one's way into bhakti. Bhakti is independent. But if we have the right mood of service to spiritual master, the serving mood, etc., with Krishna in the center for Krishna's pleasure, acting for Krishna's pleasure, that may attract the attention. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, don't try to see Krishna, but act in such a way that Krishna will see you. Does that answer your question?
So, usually when someone takes the vow, it is to attract Krishna, but once they don't feel that, although I don't think the ability to attract Krishna, still I am very with that.
That he may be pleased, that my Guru will be pleased, that I am trying to become detached from material life, I'm trying to become attached to serving you and your Katha, Krishna Katha, and your holy names. So please, by your mercy, if you will give me your mercy, then that attachment will actually blossom in my heart. If you don't give me your mercy, then all my vows. There's Sri Rupa Manjari Pada, Se Mora Sampada, Se Mora Bhajana Pujana, Se Mora Tapa Vrata, you know those parts. You are the purpose of my tapa and my vrata, to attain your shelter. So Rupa Goswami is saying that, or rather Narottama Thakur is saying that, Mahasai Thakur Mahasai. Ekadasi Vrata. So it isn't done in the mood that the yogis and the jnanis do tapasya. It should make our hearts softer, not harder. It should bring tears to our eyes, seeing our own lack and inability, that we have no devotion and we are so dependent on the mercy of Guru and Krishna. But we are trying in our feeble way.
There's many simple rules about, and only one thing is needed, is sincerity. Does it mean that
But again, there's a Krishna conscious jnana and Krishna conscious vairagya. Yukta vairagya and Krishna jnana. I don't know if there's any word Krishna jnana.
does it mean that ultimately the devotee becomes sincere, or he is sincere? Doesn't need initiation? Yeah.
No. But if someone is sincere, why will someone avoid initiation? That's not the mark of a sincere person. I am sincere, I don't need the shelter of Krishna's devotee. It's the mark of an insincere person. But ultimately, the holy name is not even dependent on initiation. But if one taking that tries to avoid initiation, he will not make advancement. Any other questions?
And all these 64 angas what we speak last days, seems that some are repeated a few times, so this is stressing that this is
Like what? Some of them, there are subtle differences.
like hearing revealed scripture
And hearing Bhagavatam.
Yes, many similarities.
Similarities, but there are subtle differences. Mostly I think it's that. But when repetition is there, whenever we find repetition in Shastra, we should see it as for emphasis.
what means serving the Lord properly.
With opulence, what does that mean? It means giving him giving him opulent things, many things, more and opulent and better, and etc., etc. And this is how we worship the Lord, because we need to give it to Him, unless otherwise we'll take it for ourselves. But Krishna ultimately wants bhakti, not the opulence. But we should give Krishna opulence. This. Vansha Tari Bhakam Krishnendriya Priti Isya Dori Premanam. Just trying to remember it. Okay, I have it now. This is an important verse which Prabhupada really speaks about. Rupa Goswami quotes it, and Prabhupada speaks about in a large part of this chapter 15. Now for your homework, for the next days until we finish the remainder of the Eastern Wave, which is page 153, 147 is the last page, and that's chapter 19. It's not very many pages, but there are some very important and very deep subject matters. Although we may be able to intellectually discuss these things, they're far beyond at least my realization. So we're going to just talk today about chapter 15, which is the first of the two chapters on spontaneous devotional service, which means Raganuga, Bhakti. In this first chapter, Prabhupada lays the basic foundational groundwork of concepts to explain what is Raganuga Bhakti. Now if you remember, way back in the early chapters, at the beginning of our course, we discussed that there are two different types of sadhana. One is called Vaidhi and one is called Raganuga. Vaidhi Bhakti means that one is impelled to remember Krishna by the rules and regulations. And Raganuga means that one is impelled to remember Krishna by spontaneous attraction to Krishna. The essence of both are the same in the sense that they are both different impetuses to making advancement by the process of remembering Krishna. So up to this point, up to chapter 14, that process known as Vaidhi Bhakti has been described. Now, the process known as spontaneous devotional service will be described. Now, in this, especially in the first half of the first page, it's a little hard to understand. So instead of reading it exactly from here, we're going to read from Chaitanya Charitamrita, wherein Prabhupada, or actually Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, and Prabhupada in his translation explain the basic points of the first paragraph. Beginning in Madhya Lila, the teachings to Sanatana Goswami, chapter 22, text 149. We'll read from text 149, not very many, just to text 154. And several of the verses that Rupa Goswami, actually the Sanskrit verses that Rupa Goswami quotes, are used by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in these verses here. My dear Sanatan, Vaidhi Bhakti Sadhanera Kahilun Vivaran Raganuga Bhaktira Lakshana Shuna Sanatana. Shuno, that means you listen, Sanatan, you hear. My dear Sanatan, I have in detail described devotional service according to the regulative principles. What is the translation in Sanskrit of devotional service according to regulative principles? Vairi sadhana bhakti. That's the, remember. Now hear from me about spontaneous devotional service and its characteristics. So what is spontaneous devotional service? That means Raganuga Bhakti. So Vairi Bhakti Sadhanera Kahilun Vivaran Raganuga Bhakti Lakshana. Lakshana means the symptoms. The symptoms. Hear from me the symptoms. O Sanatana, hear from me the symptoms of Raganuga. After I've already described what is Vairi Bhakti, because again, a lot of this information, all philosophy, Kaviraj Goswami has excerpted and placed in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So this philosophy is also here. Next, I'll read the Sanskrit, then the English, and then the Sanskrit again. So we'll pick up the words. Ragatmika Bhakti, Mukhya Vrajavasi Jan, Para Anugata Bhaktira, Raganuga Nam. The original inhabitants of Vrindavan are attached to Krishna spontaneously in devotional service. Nothing can compare to such spontaneous devotional service, which is called Ragatmika Bhakti. Who are the Ragatmika Bhaktis? And is that what it said? The gopis? The residents in Vrindavan. Yeah, all those Brajavasis who are actually in Krishna Loka, Goloka Vrindavan, these are Ragatmika Bhaktas. Nothing can compare to such spontaneous devotional service. Rag means attachment. So Ragatmika, Atmika means, like, what does it mean? One who is full, whose Atma is full of this spontaneous attachment for Krishna. So the original inhabitants of Vrindavan are attached to Krishna spontaneously in devotional service. Nothing can compare to such spontaneous devotional service, which is called Ragatmika Bhakti. When a devotee follows in the footsteps of the devotees of Vrindavan, his devotional service is called Raganuga. So Raganuga means following in footsteps. Anuga means following, and Raganuga means following in the footsteps of the Ragatmika Bhaktas. Clear? When a pure devotee, Prabhupada explains in the purport, follows the footsteps of a devotee in Vrindavan, he develops Raganuga Bhakti. That following in the footsteps means the cultivation. The one who is following the Ragatmika Bhaktas is called a Raganuga Bhakti. I'll read the Sanskrit again. Ragatmika Bhakti, Mukhya Vrajavasi Jan, means those preeminent Ragatmika Bhaktas are the Vrajavasis, the Vrajavasi Jan. Tara Anugata Bhakti. Anugata, we say that every day. Where do we say Anugata? What is that line? Of course, we'll ask our memory bank. Follow? Yes? Again. Venevedana Sakirana Anugata Koro means that I want to follow. It is a matter of following. That is what Anugata means. So, Prabhupada, in this word by word says Anugata means following. So Tara Anugata Bhakti, following those devotees who are the Ragatmika Bhaktas, that is called Nam, Raganuga Nam. That is named Raganuga. The next verse. Ishte Sarasiki Rag Parama Vishtata Bhavet Tanmaya Bhavet Bhakti Satra Ragatmikodita. And when one becomes becomes attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his natural inclination to love is fully absorbed in thoughts of the Lord. That is called transcendental attachment. And devotional service, according to that attachment, is called ragamika, or spontaneous devotional service. So this is the definition, again, of ragamika bhakti from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. I'll read it again. When one becomes attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and again, the residents of Vrindavan are the preeminent Raganuga Bhaktas. Not Raganuga Bhaktas, but Raganuga Jan. When one becomes attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his natural inclination to love is fully absorbed in thoughts of the Lord. So he's fully, always, due to this natural, spontaneous inclination to love Krishna in a specific way, he's always absorbed in those thoughts. Thoughts of what? Thoughts of Krishna. That is called transcendental attachment. That is tatmayi. That is called transcendental attachment, and devotional service according to that attachment is called ragamika. So when one is loving Krishna according to his specific attachment on this exalted level, that is called spontaneous devotional service on ragamika. Clear? When one has a specific attachment and one is completely always absorbed in that purely. Next verse. That's from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. This is 272. It's right. This is basically what we're reading from here. Then, Ishte Gada Krishna Ragera Swarupa Lakshana Ishte Avashtata E Tatashta Lakshana. So again, Swarupa Tatashta Lakshana of this. The primary characteristic of spontaneous love is deep attachment for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Absorption in Him is the marginal characteristic. So this is basically Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami's explanation of that verse of Rupa Goswami. So attachment in a particular way, and then complete absorption in that. One's consciousness is completely absorbed in loving Krishna according to that attachment. Any questions so far? Yeah.
To define transcendental attachment, now devotional service, which I think is the next quote in the same verse, is according to that transcendental attachment. Is that ragatmika or ragatmika?
That's what this is the definition of ragatmika. Because it's hard to understand in there, therefore I'm reading it from here. Prabhupada translation. So that is the definition. That is Rupa Goswami's definition of Ragatmika Bhakti. Next, Ragamayi. Mayi means full of, like that. So full of rag or attachment. Ragamayi Bhaktira, when the bhakta is full of this attachment of devotional service. Ragatmayi Bhaktira Hai Ragatmika Nama. That is called ragatmika. Tahashuni lubdo hai kona bhagyavan. Thus devotional service which consists of rag, deep attachment, is called ragatmika, spontaneous loving service. If a devotee covets such a position, he is considered to be most fortunate. What does covet mean? Deeply, desires. So if a person who really wants that, he is considered most fortunate. Kona Bhagyavan. Some fortunate people want that. Next. Lobhe Braja Vishara Bhave Kare Anugati. Shastra Yukti Nahi Mane Raganugera Prakriti. If one follows in the footsteps of the inhabitants of Vrindavan out of such transcendental covetousness, and that means lobe, greed, he does not care for the injunctions or reasonings of Shastra. That is the way of spontaneous love. Now at this point, since we mentioned such people don't care for the injunctions of Shastra, And such a person who wants that is so fortunate. Then of course here we are in Vrindavan, everyone is saying, oh, I want that, I'm so fortunate. And not only that, I don't have to follow the Shastra anymore. Because I'm so fortunate because I desire to be in that way. But it is just not that cheap. And Rupa Goswami later, and we'll explain it tomorrow, will explain exactly the process of Raganuga. But it is not cheap, and it is not actually a giving up of the Shastric injunctions or Vaidhi Bhakti at all. It's a matter again of where the motivation is. Does it come from actual deep personal attachment to loving Krishna in a particular way, pure attachment, or does it come from the Shastra? And what happens, not often, but sometimes, someone doesn't actually have even the slightest, thinnest, leanest, meanest thread of true loathe or greed, and yet wants to act on this platform, and therefore doesn't follow properly. And we call such people what? Sahajis. That is the definition of a sahaji. So there's Prabhupada's purport is very important here. And it describes sahajiyas. An advanced devotee is attracted by the service rendered by an eternal servitor of the Lord. This attraction is called spontaneous attraction. Technically it is called sarup upalabdhi. This stage is not achieved in the beginning. In the beginning one has to render service strictly according to the regulative principles set forward by the revealed scriptures and spiritual master. By continuously rendering service to the process of Vaidhi Bhakti, one's natural inclination is gradually awakened, and that is called spontaneous attraction or Raganuga Bhakti. And the last verse we're going to read, the purport is even longer than that. The important purport is also from Bhattari Samhita Sindhu. Viran jantim abhivyaktam brajavasi janadishu rigatmikam anusrita yasa raganugochitae. Devotional service, spontaneous love is vividly expressed and manifested by the inhabitants of Vrindavan. Devotional service that accords with their devotional service is called Raganuga Bhakti, or devotional service following in the wake of spontaneous loving service. Is it clear? There is the Ragatmika Bhaktis, Ragatmika devotees are the residents of Vrindavan because they are completely full of attachment to Krishna in a particular mood. What are the particular moods? There is either Madhurja, or sometimes called Shringara Ras, conjugal, and then there's Vatsalya Ras, parental, and then there is Sakha Ras, or friendship, and Dasya Ras. Those are basically the moods. And of course there is Shanta Ras, neutrality, but the Shanta Ras and neutrality in Braja is always mixed with other rasas. And Rupa Goswami at times doesn't even consider Shanta Ras actual ras. So they have a specific attachment to loving Krishna in a specific way, and it is blossomed, but not fully blossomed to Prem, because remember, the Ragatmika Bhaktas, that's what we're talking about. They have a fully blossomed, loving attachment to Krishna, and they're always absorbed. These are the two parts of the definition of Ragatmika Bhakti, and they're always absorbed in loving Krishna in this way. Completely always absorbed. There is not a moment, no one has to tell them to remember Krishna and think about his pastimes. They're spontaneously, lovingly, constantly, always attached and absorbed to him. Those devotees who have achieved a specific mood of service, parallel to the residents of Vrindavan, but it is undeveloped yet, and they are following in the footsteps of the residents of Vrindavan. They are very fortunate to attain this spontaneous attraction, Sarup Upalabdhi, and they are following in the footsteps of the residents of Vrindavan, and they are called Raganuga Bhaktas. And they are not bound by the rules and regulations, but they follow them nonetheless. That will be explained in tomorrow's class or next stage, depending on how long it takes. So this is basically the content of the first paragraph over here, or the first two paragraphs, or one paragraph. And it should be clear. It's not difficult to understand. Next, in the second paragraph, that definition that we had just read is there. Srila Rupa Goswami has defined Raganuga Bhakti as spontaneous attraction for something while completely absorbed in thoughts of it. And that is what we just read as Ragatmika Bhakti. Now, next, devotional service under the heading, and this is described later too, and there's two kinds of Ragatmika Bhakti. There are two categories. One is called, as Prabhupada says, Kama Rupa, and the other is called Sambandha Rupa. Kama Rupa means taking the form of transcendental lust, and Sambandha Rupa means relationship. These are Ragatmika, the two categories of Ragatmika Bhakti. This is all technical stuff, and just by memorizing the names, it doesn't mean much, but we should know philosophy because it's written here. Now, again, if one love has these attachments, it's either Kamanuga or Kama Rupa or Sambandha Rupa. Right? And they're moods of loving absorption in service of Krishna. And again, they're always thinking of Krishna. So to emphasize the process of always thinking of Krishna and how purifying it is, no matter which way you are always absorbed in thinking about Him, Rupa Goswami quotes some verses from the 7th canto of the first chapter of the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm going to read them from here because there's a few more verses in addition that I'd like to read. Now, this is going to take us to the paragraph on page 120, beginning with, there may be some difficulty in understanding that both the gopis and Kamsa achieve the same goal. Do you see where that is on page 120? You see that? It's the next to last, the beginning of the third paragraph. So what I'm going to read is basically going to take us up to this point. This is from the first, this is a very important chapter of the 7th canto. It's the introduction to the story of Prahlad Maharaj, when Yudhisthira Maharaj and Narada Muni are discussing. And this is the discussion that leads to Narada Muni describing Prahlad Maharaj and Hiranyakashipu, and Hiranyakashipu is one of the two gatekeepers of Vaikuntha. So, this is from this first chapter in the 7th canto, verse 33. Narada Muni continued, O best of the Pandavas, your two cousins, Shishupala and Dantavakra, the sons of your maternal aunt, were formerly associates of Lord Vishnu. Because they were cursed by Brahmanas, they fell from Vaikuntha to the material world. Maharaj Yudhisthira inquired, what kind of great curse could affect even liberated Vishnu Bhaktas? And what sort of person could curse even the Lord's associates? For unflinching devotees of the Lord to fall again into the material world is impossible. Oops, I'm reading from the wrong part. That was the end of where I wanted to be. Narada Muni is describing this is during the Rajasuya sacrifice. Yudhisthira Maharaj had inquired from Narada Muni, and I'm just Sukadeva Goswami was describing this. The question Yudhisthira asked the question, how is it possible for Sisupal and Dantavakra to enter into the body of Krishna, because Krishna had just chopped off their heads and their souls came out and entered into the body of Krishna. So Yudhisthira asked Narada Muni, how is this possible? So after hearing the request of Maharaj Yudhisthira, Narada Muni, the most powerful spiritual master who knew everything, was very pleased. Thus he replied in the presence of everyone taking part in the Jagat. The great sage Sri Naradaji said, O king, blasphemy and praise, chastisement and respect are experienced because of ignorance. The body of the conditioned soul is planned by the Lord for suffering in the material world through the agency of the external energy. My dear king, the conditioned soul, being in the bodily conception of life, considers his body to be his self and considers everything in relationship with the body to be his. Because he has this wrong conception of life, he is subjected to dualities like praise and chastisement. Now here is the parts that are very important. Because of the bodily concept of life, the conditioned soul thinks that when the body is annihilated, the living being is annihilated. Therefore, by enmity or by devotional service, by fear, by affection, or by lusty desires, by all of these or any one of them, if a conditioned soul somehow or another concentrates his mind upon the Lord, the result is the same. For the Lord, because of his blissful position, is never affected by enmity or friendship. Now here, Narada Muni isn't actually prescribing that people become the Lord's enemy at all, but he's emphasizing, as we explained a few weeks ago, he's emphasizing how powerful thinking of Krishna is. By fear, by devotional service, by enmity, by affection, or by lusty desire, by all of these or any of these, if a conditioned soul somehow or another concentrates his mind upon the Lord, the result is the same. For the Lord, because of his blissful position, is never affected by enmity or friendship. So Rupa Goswami and Prabhupada are using this verse and the following verses to explain what is Raganuga Bhakti. Thinking of the Lord in one of these ways, becoming totally absorbed in him, and thus becoming released from the bondage of conditional life. Narada Muni continued, by devotional service one cannot achieve such intense absorption in thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as one can through empty towards him. That is my opinion. Very interesting opinion. Just like when you love someone, your mind will occasionally go to that person. But when you hate someone, your mind can't stop thinking about the person. Narada Muni is saying that, showing how Sisupal was how Sisupal entered into Krishna's body. As Prabhupada explains in the purport, Sriman Narada Muni, the topmost pure devotee, praises Krishna's enemies like Sisupal because their minds are always completely absorbed in Krishna. Indeed, he thinks himself deficient in the inspiration of being feelingly absorbed in Krishna consciousness. This does not mean, however, that the enemies of Krishna are more elevated than Krishna's pure devotees. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami also thinks of himself in a humble way. Jagai Madai Haite Muni Sapapishta Puru Seda Kita Haite Muni Sela Vista. I am a worse sinner than Jagai and Madai, and am even lower than the worms in stool. So the devotee is thinking like that, but actually the pure devotees who are always loving Krishna are more exalted. A grassworm, next verse. A grassworm, is everyone following it? I know it's hard when I'm just reading, but it's very, very important. A grassworm could find in a hole of a wall by a bee always thinks of the bee in fear and enmity, and later becomes a bee simply because of such remembrance. Similarly, if the conditioned souls somehow or another think of Krishna, who is Satchitananda Vigraha, they will become free from their sins. whether thinking of him as their worshipable Lord or as an enemy. Because of constantly thinking of him, they will regain their spiritual bodies. Many persons have attained liberation simply by thinking of Krishna with great attention and giving up sinful activities. This great attention may be due to lusty desires, inimical feelings, fear, affection, or devotional service. I shall now explain how one receives Krishna's mercy simply by concentrating one's mind upon him. My dear King Yudhisthira, the gopis by their lusty desires, Kamsa by his fear, Shishupal and other kings by envy, and Yadus by their family relationship with Krishna, you Pandavas by your great affection for Krishna, and we, the general devotees, by our devotional service, have attained the mercy of Krishna. Somehow or another, one must consider the form of Krishna very seriously. Then, by one of the 5 different processes mentioned above, one can return home back to Godhead. Atheists, like King Vena, however, being unable to think of Krishna's form in any of these 5 ways, cannot attain salvation. Therefore, one must somehow think of Krishna, whether in a friendly way or inimical way. So, Vena went to hell because he was so envious. But his envy wasn't directed toward Krishna. Shishupal, on the other hand, he was absorbed in Krishna's body. He was liberated. And he was envious, but because his envy was concentrated on the thoughts of Krishna, he actually achieved a spiritual destination. But, as all the commentators have explained, that the actual result of thinking about Krishna in enmity and fear will not be the same as thinking about Krishna in great love as the gopis think of Krishna. Even though they attain the same platform, spiritual platform, they do not attain the results, as shown in the case of Shishupal. What happened to Shishupal? He became absorbed into the body of Krishna. He did not go to Goloka Vrindavan and carry on an eternal loving relationship with him. So the results are on the same platform, just like, as Prabhupada explains in the purport, in the commentary of Nectar Devotion, that someone may be situated in the sun, but one person may be situated in the sunlight, and the other person may be situated directly on the sun planet, and we may say that both are situated in the sun. So similarly, Shishupal and Kamsa received the same result as the gopis who were thinking about Krishna and Kamsa and Shishupal. But their result, although on the same platform, the spiritual platform, was not at all the same. Actually speaking, the positive result of thinking about Krishna for demons like Shishupal is that they are killed by Krishna and they die and they go to not Goloka Vrindavan, but they become merged into the effulgence of Krishna, which is the exact same result that Krishna always gives his enemies, who he kills personally. They go to Brahman. And those thinking about Krishna in this way also will go to Brahman. So it is not, and the Mayavadis also go to Brahman. So if the enemies go to Brahman, what kind of great result is that? That's not a reward, that's a punishment. And this is the thinking of the devotees. So this is explained over here. By the same perfection, this is right at the end, the middle of 122, we must always remember the example of the sun and sunshine. Those who are impersonalists can merge into the sunshine like Brahmajyoti, whereas those who are in love with the Supreme Lord enter into the supreme abode of the Lord, Goloka Vrindavan. Now, Prabhupada is going to explain here, because there are 2 things, Kama Rupa and Sambandha Rupa. These will be Sambandha Rupa. The Sambandha Rupa is going to be explained as the first topic in the next chapter. But this Kama Rupa, or loving Krishna in with the lust, Kam means lust. And we learn from the Bhagavad Gita, Kama Esha, Krodha Esha, Rajaguno Samudva, Mahashano, Mahapatma, Vijayana Miyavarinam, that this Kam is the great, sinful, all-devouring enemy. It is born of the motive passion. It must be destroyed. right? But this calm doesn't have anything to do with the so-called calm of the gopis. It has nothing to do with it. And so Prabhupada spends quite a bit of time explaining what is this Kamarupa or Kamatmika Bhakti, or Bhakti. Remember, there are two different kinds of Ragatmika Bhakti. One is Kamarupa and the other is Sambandharupa, or Kamatmika and Sambandhatmika. Thank you. So first he's going to explain something, a little bit, about the glorious calm of the gopis of Vrindavan, and also it's also true for the Svakya relationship, or the married relationship with the Dwarkavasi queens, Mahishi Bhav. So Prabhupada explains the lusty attitude of the gopis does not refer to any sort of sex indulgence. So we should understand this. Of course, we all know it, but we should hear it again and again, that the love that the gopis feel for Krishna in this mood has nothing to do with anything that anyone has ever experienced in the material world. It has nothing to do with it. But this type of material lust, this calm of the material world, is a perverted reflection of the real calm in the spiritual world. So, as in the perverted reflection, we can look at the perverted reflection, and by understanding a little of the mood of the perverted reflection, we can understand something about the actual reality. But we should understand there is a complete 180-degree difference. They are opposite in one sense, although they resemble each other. But to help us understand what this is like, the only reference point that we can possibly have is the dealings between young boys and young girls. And therefore it's called Kama Rupa or Kamatmika. But it actually has nothing to do with material Kama. Nothing at all. So we can't imagine what it's like, the love that the gopis feel for Krishna. It is beyond our imagination, and we are requested not to try to imagine. Every devotee in his perfectional stage has a spontaneous attraction to the Lord. This attraction is sometimes called the lusty desire of the devotee. The lust is the devotee's excessive desire to serve the Lord in a particular capacity. Herein lies the difference between lust and love, or kam and kam, spiritual kam and material kam. The lust, so-called lust, we'll call it right here, is the devotee's excessive desire to serve the Lord in a particular capacity. Such a desire may seem to be a desire for enjoying the Lord, but actually the endeavor is to serve the Lord in that capacity. For example, a devotee may be desiring to associate the personality of Godhead as his cowherd friend. He will want to serve the Lord by assisting him in controlling the cows in the pasturing ground. This may appear to be a desire to enjoy the company of the Lord, but actually it is spontaneous love, serving him by assisting in managing the transcendental cows. So again, the key to understanding this is that that devotee who is maturely wants to love Krishna in this way wants to serve Krishna, and that is his motivation, and this is how he wants to serve Krishna. There is not the slightest tinge of mundane calm or mundane lust or the desire to enjoy anything within his consciousness. His desire is simply to serve Krishna, following in the mood of some of the residents of Vrindavan. Therefore, he is called Raganuga. Any questions so far? Yeah.
So that means that not every devotee attain this platform Raganuga.
That one can attain, that means that one can attain prema by following always Vaidhi Bhakti, then he go to Vaikuntha. And if
One can attain what? By
prema, Krishna
Prema.
without following Raganuga Bhakti, and then when he developed prema, he go on Vaikuntha.
Yes, there are two paths. If one only will follow Vaidhi Bhakti, this is described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, one will go to Vaikuntha.
And my
But
question,
why is it that Prabhupada never emphasized that point? But why didn't Prabhupada emphasize that point?
Because he wanted us to follow the steps of Radharani.
Right, but that's not why Prabhupada... No, the point that Prabhupada didn't emphasize was that if you follow Vaidhi Bhakti up to Prema, you will go to Vaikuntha. It is clearly in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Why didn't Prabhupada emphasize that point? It's very clear, it's simple. If you understand our own minds. Oh! If I follow Vaidhi Bhakti, I'll go to Vaikuntha. I don't want to go to Vaikuntha, I want to go to Goloka Vrindavan. If I follow Raganuga Bhakti, I'll go to Goloka Vrindavan. And if I follow Vaidhi Bhakti, therefore I shouldn't follow Vaidhi Bhakti. And therefore, the neophyte devotee will give up his following of Vaidhi Bhakti and promptly, instead of going to Krishna Loka, go to where? Hell. Quickly! Express train. The Naraka mail.
Even such devotee like Narada Muni also, he follow Vaidhi Bhakti?
Narada Muni, he is everywhere, practically speaking. He goes everywhere. But when he goes to Braja, it's actually said there's a Narada Kund by Govardhan, where he has to perform austerities to attain the platform of going to Braja. This Braja Bhakti is very rare. Even Narada isn't exactly a Braja Bhakta. Prahlad, not a Braja Bhakta. Yeah.
Through the Raganuga Bhaktas, by following in the footsteps of the Raganuga Bhaktas, do they become Raganuga also?
Yes.
I see. And the second one is, you say that Raganuga Bhaktas, they have a particular service. They serve in a particular mood.
Yes.
So, does that mean that they have a particular mood is one of the five rasas?
Yes.
Oh, so this means they will be serving only one of the rasas?
Yes.
If they're conjugal level, they will be only conjugal level?
Yeah, because you can't be a conjugal lover and a mother at the same time.
Yeah,
Because it doesn't work.
I see, but
Rasa Bas, that is what Rasa Bas means. If the moods of your service conflict,
but they can serve in that, they can assist in that rasa.
what rasa?
Say, I have read, the mother-in-law of Radharani.
But mother-in-law of Radharani, well, that's a different topic. But that's a different topic completely, because she is internal energy of Krishna. But her mood assists in conjugal rasa. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about someone within himself having the mood of lover and mother at the same time. It can't be done.
But they can assist.
The cowherd boys are looking at the mothers as assisting them in the cowherd boy rasa. And the mothers are looking at the cowherd boys as they're just paraphernalia, not like that, heartless and cold like that. But they're part of Vatsalya rasa. And the gopis see everything is just part of Madhurya rasa. But also some people, some personalities have mixtures also. Like Balaram has friendship, parental, like that.
So what's that?
What's what?
If it is mixed.
What?
I understood that they may not be serving different rasas, but they may assist. But now
Just like Subal. So the friends of Krishna have a mixture of the very intimate friends, have a mixture. They assist in the dealings between Krishna and the gopis. So they have friendship and some conjugal in there, but not in the same way as the gopis. But this is getting into advanced subject. Is it clear though? It's pretty simple.
So I understand.
But
that,
yeah.
I understand that they may have one rasa in which they serve, and then they may assist in others. That's right.
Something like that. Yeah.
Sometimes it's explained that higher rasas like Madhura rasa includes automatically all
Yeah.
other rasas. So how do we understand this?
Because
who actually only mood of Kamarika.
but not. It has some aspects of the affection and desire to care for and thinking of one's own, but not exactly the motherly affection. But there's friendship in there. It's all there.
They get constant welfare of Krishna just as the parents.
Like that. But not the actual feeling of motherly love. It conflicts. Just like later on in the 10th canto when Pradyumna is born, his eternal wife Rati first nurtured him as a child after she found him in the fish. You know that story, right? And then he began to grow very quickly. Very quickly, he was a young man, and her feeling of motherliness immediately changed to conjugal feelings. So he looked at her and said, "Before you were feeling mother," and actually even in our material relationships, when we think about mother, to think about anything conjugal is completely crazy. Well, it's completely crazy. It's completely improper, completely crazy. Everyone knows that the mother and the father have a relationship. Everyone knows the mother and father have a relationship, but we never think of them together in that way because it's not proper. It's rasa basa. Improper. It's an improper mixing of rasas, the parental rasa and the conjugal rasa.
Taking the 5 rasas, there's specific personalities in the spiritual world who exemplifies that rasa.
Many. That's called the Ashraya Vigraha. They are. This will be explained later. They are the Ashraya Tattva for that, and Krishna is the Vishaya. This is Rasa Tattva. This is explained in the next section when Rasa is explained.
So will the devotees necessarily only aspire to the Rasa Ashraya, or what will the devotees aspire to somebody else? Like one another devotees or majorities instead of majorities?
No, but anyway, that's jumping the question. Yeah.
When Raghava Bhakta affects Krishna does it happen in this world itself or after getting liberated?
You can't. Of course, it's after liberated. In the spirit,
Not be sahajiya and start to practice.
thinking of accepting a resident of Vrindavan,
Yeah.
and thinking of oneself as the follower of that resident of Vrindavan, and thinking of oneself in that mood, and accepting Ekadasa Bhav, which means all the paraphernalia or the accoutrements of that rasa. That is the top part of a Shakti. This is explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita in Prabhupada. The top part of a Shakti, and that will help carry one to Baba. And anything premature is premature. Anything more than
But main qualification is this lobha you explained. So, but how is this that one develop this lobha, or what can help develop this?
I was just reading on the folio program yesterday. One devotee asked Prabhupada, what is the difference between between karma yoga and bhakti yoga. And Prabhupada said, don't try to understand everything at once. On a question like that, that was his answer. Because it's not just a matter of memorizing the terms and figuring out this, and we all have a tendency to intellectually try to understand and make an intellectual adjustment, as if making an intellectual adjustment, intellectually understanding is what this is about. And it isn't what this is about. Now, the last thing we'll discuss today is page 123. What is this Kamanuga? Sensual attraction, page 123, Kamarupa. This extreme desire to serve the Lord is manifest in the transcendental land of Braja, and it is specifically manifested amongst the gopis. The gopis' love for Krishna is so elevated that for our understanding it is sometimes explained as being lusty desires. The author of Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj, has explained the distinction between lusty desire and the service attitude in this statement. Lusty desire refers to the desire to gratify one's personal senses, and transcendental desire refers to the desire for serving the senses of the Lord. That was the verse I was practicing. Atmendriya priti vancha tari bali kam. That means atmendriya priti, to gratify one's own senses. The desire for that, vancha, tare balikam, it is called kam or lust. Krishnendriya priti, itscha, the desire to satisfy the indriya or the senses of Krishna. Dode Krishna, Dode Premanam, its name is Prem. When you desire to satisfy Krishna, not just intellectually, but this is actually the purity of one's heart, and through one's love, one's thinking of pleasing Krishna only, and everything one's doing has no material contamination, but the desire simply for Krishna's pleasure, that is called prem. And when we do something which is meant to satisfy our senses in subtle and gross ways, that is called kam or lust. The gopis wanted nothing at all to gratify the senses of the Lord, and there is no instance of this in the material world. Therefore, the gopis' ecstatic love for Krishna is sometimes described by scholars as being like the lusty desires of the material world, but actually this should not be taken as a literal fact. It is simply a way of trying to understand the transcendental situation. The gopis would take care of their transcendental bodies. They would comb their hair, they would dress, they would put on their kajal, eye makeup, they would put their earring on over here, not an earring, they would put their nose ring over there, they would put their shawl on, they would put a flower over here just to satisfy Krishna, to bring Krishna pleasure. They considered this body belonged to Krishna. This was their mood. It was completely transcendental. Nothing to do with the material world and material lust. And to prove and to show and give examples as it has nothing to do with material lust, there is some evidence, the Shastric evidence is quoted. Great devotees up to the standard of Uddhav are very dear friends of the Lord, and they desire to follow in the footsteps of the gopis. So the gopis' love for Krishna is certainly not material lusty desires. Otherwise, how could Uddhava aspire to follow in their footsteps? Another instance is Lord Chaitanya himself. After accepting the sannyas order of life, he taught that there is no better method of worshipping Krishna than that conceived by the gopis. Thus the gopis' method of worshipping the Lord, as if impelled by lusty desires, was praised very highly even by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This very fact means that although the attraction of the gopis for Krishna appears to be very lusty, it is not in the least bit material. Unless one is fully situated in the transcendental position, the relationship of the gopis with Krishna is very difficult to understand. Because it appears to be just like ordinary dealings of young boys and girls, it is sometimes misrepresented to be like the ordinary sex of the material world. Unfortunately, persons who cannot understand the transcendental nature of the loving affairs of the gopis and Krishna take it for granted that Krishna's love affairs and the gopis are mundane transactions, and therefore they sometimes indulge in painting licentious pictures in some modernistic style and sell them in Delhi and Jaipur. So one should avoid these pictures because they will bring out, because the author was not on the proper platform, and this is not the proper thing for showing to people. It will produce material transformations in our minds, and we should avoid that very strictly. Now, one last point. Two last points. One is about Kubja. What? Kubja. On the other hand, now here Kubja was not on the level of Kamarupa, Kamatmika. Kubja is not on this level. On the other hand, the lusty desire of Kubja is described by learned scholars as being almost lusty desires. That means Kam Praya. Praya means almost, or like. So it is like lust. Kubja was like, she was almost lusty, almost material lust. But Kubja was a hunchback woman who also wanted Krishna with great ecstatic love, but her desire for Krishna is almost mundane, so it's prayakam. So her love cannot be compared to the love of the gopis. Her loving affection for Krishna is called kama praya, or almost like the love for Krishna. This is called sadarani, or courtesanship. This is neither kama rupa nor sambandha rupa. Sadarani means she was a courtesan. Means like prostitute, social lady. But because her love was focused on Krishna, her lust, actual material lust, was focused on Krishna, it is like Kam, because it was purified and purifying, because it was focused on Krishna. But it was not and cannot be compared to the love of the gopis of Vrindavan, who had not a trace of material Kam in their hearts. Huh? No, completely different. Who was she following? She was a Raganuga Bhakta. Anuga means following. She was following Krishna. And that's not what Raganuga means. You follow someone who loves Krishna. Not, you don't follow. You don't deal with Krishna directly. This is actually described later. This is the more technical, esoteric elements of the philosophy. And why are we even discussing them in our class? Because Rupa Goswami has described them here in his first Eastern Wave of the Ocean. In his service, we are doing this to make sure you understand things properly.
Why is she in the material world? If she's still in material desires.
Why is she still in the material world?
Why is she in the spiritual world?
How do you know she's in the spiritual world?
Well, this event took place in Dwarka.
But see, there's different. No, the event took place in Mathura. But there are different types of Krishna's leelas. One is nitya and the other is naimitic. Nitya means eternal, that takes place in the spiritual world, and naimitic means that it is occasional and takes place in the material world. So, for instance, Krishna's killings of the demons, they take place in the material world. But Krishna also, he straightened Kubja out. That took place here. No one with material, any tinge of material, and especially no one can get to Braja.
What's number this verse about this definition prema and kama which you quote?
Adi Lila, chapter 4, text maybe 175. But it's in Adi Lila, chapter 4. Very important verse.
And his word was
Atma Indriya. to satisfy one's own senses. Envy, priti, vancha, that means the desire to satisfy one's own senses.
This verse by Narada that you read.
So many verses.
There was one particular that all of them were thinking of Krishna in a particular way.
Yes, there are I think 5 different ways.
So we're like general devotees who think of Krishna, obtain Krishna. And there were also mentioned in other ways. So are there people or devotees who are following these other ways, like Shishupal or something?
Don't become a follower of Shishupalanuga.
But this
Shishupalanugas? Not in ISKCON. No, we don't follow the path of Shishupal. That's for demons. And demons go to the Brahmajyoti if they are fortunate enough to be killed by Krishna. You don't follow Shishupal. Because why? Because Rupa Goswami, right in the beginning, what's practically the first thing he explains is Anyavilasita sunyam jnanakama anavita anukulena Krishna anushilanam. That the remembering Krishna is Krishna anushilanam, but it has to be anukul. It has to be in a favorable light. Not to kill Krishna. And out of envy and hatred and fear. And then it is not devotional service. And then it is enmity, and you get, because Krishna is so kind, out of His mercy you get a spiritual result, but not the spiritual result is punishment. Going to Brahmana.
Shishupal and Anantavaka wasn't that the last slide that was supposed to be reinstated as
We understand that they weren't reinstated. Not then. But then they became Jagai and Madhai. And then they were reinstated. By the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Last question.
Why only 3 lives is mentioned?
Huh?
Only 3 lives is mentioned for Jain.
The 4th one? Why is that giant
They wanted to be demons for only 3 lives. For 3 lives is mentioned, not for 4 lives.
because they became devotees in the 4th life. Very good devotees too. Madhav and Jagadananda. No. Yes, you don't know. Madhav was one. Nice names. Oh, that's such a wonderful, very instructive story too. If the questions on Raganuga get too intense for me and too difficult, then I'll tell that story to escape. But so far you're all being very merciful. But Prabhupada also explains the answer to your question. You follow sincerely the path of Vaidhi Bhakti, especially serving one's spiritual master, and then by the grace of Krishna, it is uncovered. And how will that grace of Krishna come? We will see. It can come any way He likes. But also, right in the beginning I explained, and as Prabhupada explained, that sometimes our service is mixed. In other words, sometimes we look at the deities and our heart melts to some degree. That is an element of Raganuga in there, and we should cultivate those spontaneous feelings of affection for Krishna's devotees. And also, in addition, if we put special emphasis on, if we, as Rupa Goswami explained, if we give attention to Panch Anga Bhakti, those 5 most potent forms, then by the mercy of our Guru, we'll make advancement. Okay? Okay, so please carefully read the next chapter for tomorrow. That is your homework. There are no questions. Oh, you want the tests? You hand them out. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna goes to Srila Prabhupada.